Hello everybody, welcome back. Today we are going to work with some experimental features. So there's this new thing that came out, which is the Masonry grid. It's only available in Firefox, so I went ahead and janked up my Firefox settings in my dev version of Firefox so that we could start playing with this and see if we can create a Masonry grid with a fallback for the browsers that don't support it, since right now it's not all that well supported. So let's take a look at what that looks like. So we're still working on the DevSpace website. We're going to be taking the last time we worked on it, we got our speaker cards looking nice. But the thing is, depending on the length of the bio, so I take these two side by side, right? This bio is a lot longer than this bio. And so we have all this white space. So if we do a Masonry grid, which basically this speaker would end up here, right? And you'd get the stair stepping, which would be a lot nicer. So and if we end up with a browser that doesn't support it yet, then they'll still get this normal grid layout. So let's look at the support. I'm going to use that. I use Can I Use to look at for support stuff. That gives me a really nice idea of what I can use. Because it will tell me, I can say Masonry. There we go, already found it. So Masonry, the Masonry grid was, as you can see, is very much unsupported yet. But if we look, see grid template rows Masonry, and then CSS property Masonry, we can see over here under Firefox that there's a little flag that tells us that, hey, we're actually supported using it says can be enabled by setting layout grid template masonry value enabled. And same here, grid masonry template enabled. So I went into my settings, and this is the Firefox Developer Edition. And I went into my settings over here and I said grid masonry layout. And I went ahead and enabled it so that we can see and so that we can try to make it work. So I haven't tried this before. But we're going to see if we can make it work. So this may be a complete flop. Y'all are going to be able to figure that out with me as we try this out today. So first thing I'm going to do is look at our code. So we have our speakers, right? They're already a grid. So I'm going to look at, because I don't even know what the spec looks like. Over here in the setting, it tells me that I can see, here's the information for how to make it work, like how the features is supposed to work. So this opens me up right here. So as you can see, the grid layout, right, based on the size of the element, lays out a little bit differently. So that's what we're trying to achieve. And so here they tell us what our code is going to look like. So we still have, this is a standard grid, right? Display grid, that's still normal. But the difference is in our rows, we're going to set it to masonry. And then our columns still stay very much a normal column type of setting, and we still have a gap, and we can justify our content, and that's also very much in the normal grid spec today. So let's give that a go and see what happens, and we'll see if we can make that work. So in our code, let me go find our code. I'll make that a little bit bigger, make it a little bit more readable. There we go. And we're gonna, so we're in our speakers, right? Because we're looking at our speaker page. So if I go back to here, we're looking at our speaker page. So we're in our speakers. If we look at our HTML, and we have our CSS for it. Let's go find our speakers. Where's our list of speakers? There's a list of speakers, and we have a class of speakers. So in here, let's go find our class of speakers. That's our CSS file. Speakers, there we go. So we have our links. Where else do we have speakers? Speaker card. What's our container? Speaker card, speaker card. Speakers display grid. There we go. So this is where we don't actually have a row set at all. So let's try a grid row masonry and see what happens. Control save. Refresh. Please work. Nothing. Okay. Well, let's find out if it actually took the change. Inspect. I'll make this a little bit bigger as well. Nope, not you. This side. Nope. You're fine. You don't need to go bigger. We want to make you bigger. Nope, it's not going to let me. Okay. So in our speakers, we're going to inspect. Let's find out if we can make this work. There's our section speakers, and we have a display grid, and it's saying masonry. The grid row has no effect on this item since, oh, did I just type it in wrong? Let's find out. A grid template rows. What did I type? Oh, grid, yeah. Let's type that correctly. Grid template rows. There we go. Maybe that'll work a little bit better. Haha! Wow, that just worked. That is awesome. So now it's taking exactly the amount of room it needs and making it, and we're still getting, you know, it's still in the right order where it's 1, 2. You can see that we haven't messed with our alphabetical order, right? It's B, C, D, E, and so on and so forth based on the first name. The thing is, we now have to write some kind of fallback, because if we go to Chrome does not support it, and based on can I use, let's start there. Chrome obviously does not support it, and it's not even under experimental. So I'm going to take my standard Chrome instance that does not have a bunch of feature things enabled like this Firefox version does. And if I refresh that, nothing should happen, right? And so our grid still just kind of works. So we don't even really need to do a fallback, because what happens here is actually pretty cool. What's going to happen is if we look at what, okay, so that turned out to happen a lot easier and faster than I thought it was going to do. That I thought was going to happen today. If we look at the code over here for our speakers, we're going to see that it simply gets omitted. There's our speakers. We can see that it just doesn't read it, right? It's just not there. So I'm going to hard refresh again to see, to make sure that we have the latest and greatest. But as you can see, there it is. It basically says, hey, I don't know what to do with this. So it's just going to ignore it, which means that we can leave this as is. And whenever Chrome implements it for, you know, average users, or even when Firefox implements it for the average user, it'll just magically work. So the cool thing about CSS in situations like this is we can put that code in so that when the feature becomes available, it'll gracefully start looking for it. And when it's not, then you'll just get the fallback behavior, which is a standard grid. So if I copy this, my local URL, right? It's just localhost right now. Everything's local to my machine. And I go into my standard version of Firefox, which does not have all the feature flags enabled. And yes, for those who are noticing the number of browsers in my UI, I'm a front-end developer, that's why. And I do like to test in multiple browsers because of differences in browsers. We will see that, not now. Just give me my browser, will you? We can see that in standard Firefox, we're still in Firefox, right? This is my dev version. This is my not dev version. We can see that it has the same behavior as in Chrome. So we have our masonry working. That was super easy. It's just a standard grid. Let's go back and review the code really quick because that was super awesome. All we did was set the grid template rows to masonry and it just worked. So that's cool. The only thing is, again, you'll have to, to get it to show up in your this is the experiments tab in my developer instance. So we're really dealing with some cutting edge pieces at this point. I have that enabled to be able to go ahead and do that. So there you go. So let's see what else we're going to do to this site, because we're nowhere near done with this site. The other thing I noticed the other day, actually, while playing in Firefox, so I'm going to show this and we're going to fix it, is as you can see, my overlay over here doesn't look very good. It looks great in Chrome. If I go ahead and this is Chrome. If I go ahead and do the mobile version, our overlay in Chrome looks really nice. Our overlay in Firefox doesn't give us that kind of frosty bit that we get here. So we're going to have to do a fallback for that overlay, because that can get, like, yeah, we're hiding the content up here, but this is a little confusing for users. And we definitely want to make sure that we're cross-browser working okay, because we can't guarantee what browser a user is going to be using. So let's fix that really quick. So let's go find our nav CSS while we're dealing with cross-browser compatibility things. So our nav, I think, if I remember correctly, is part of our menu. And so we have a menu CSS. And in our menu CSS, we did a background with a backdrop filter of blur. And I did a background overlay. And so that overlay is probably what we want to edit. It's that overlay variable. So our variables are up here. Let's find out what we did for overlay. We did a 0.5. So let me up that to 0.75 and see if that gives us a better frosty look with not as much transparency. That's still really overlaid. I wonder if it's just not taking the background blur correctly. So that's a lot darker, but it's still... Oh, that's interesting, the fact that it scrolls. Does it do that in Chrome as well? Let's find out. Yeah, it does that in Chrome as well. That's not good. Let's find out what's up with that too. So our Chrome version is still nice and dark. It still works nicely. This, however, is being a little bit of a butt. So let's find out what's going on. Where's the... That's what we want. This is what I want to see. It is, so it is ignoring the backdrop filter, which is fine. And our overlay is 0.75, but it's still really, but if I go a lot darker, we're going to lose the blur effect in Chrome, right? So if I go a lot darker on the overlay, right, we're starting to really lose the blur effect. So what we're going to do is we're going to do an @supports. So @supports is a way where you can do conditional formatting based on whether a particular property is being supported in a particular browser, which is really nice. It's because it allows us to do it allows things to gracefully degrade. So in this case, we're going to say @media, not, I think it's a media. Let me double check and do support syntax, because I think maybe it's just @supports. The MDM web docs is where I go for everything. No, it's just @supports. It's not a media. So we're going to do @supports, not, because it's the right, we're wanting to do something else when it doesn't support our background filter. And so in here, so we're going to say @supports, not this property, this very specific property. And take out the semicolon. We're going to say that our backdrop, our background, right, is no longer going to be our overlay. we're just going to go ahead and do I'm going to do an overlay alternate. So we're going to put this one back to 0.5 to get the nice effect where it is supported. In here, we're going to do like 95, something really high, right? So we're going to do overlay. Oh, we need to put we do need the selector, however, otherwise that's not going to work. Overlay alternate. And so by doing that, in what's going to happen is in browsers that support the backdrop filter, we're going to have this overlay color, right? That's what we see in Chrome. In Firefox that does not support it yet, what we're going to have is this background, which is our darker or less transparent background, so that we get so that we can still get the effect on the one that does. So see, now we're back to having that nice overlay with the blur and everything. Looks great in Chrome. Now if we go to Firefox, which is the one where it was not supported in, where it was not working properly. There we go, right? It wasn't working properly here. So we're going to do shift refresh now that we have that. And so now with that 95, we don't have the blur, but you can still see there's a little bit of transparency. We still need to fix the scroll, but we still have a little bit of transparency, but at least now we're not seeing straight through it. It's a lot nicer that way. And so we can have the difference. So if I put them side by side, close that. If I put these two side by side, you can see the difference between the two, right? And so this one takes the lighter transparency because the blur happens and it looks nice. This one takes the darker transparency because there's no blur yet. And we're not compromising or killing the effect that we can get on the one that supports it, which is the cool part. Now let's fix this little thing, right? Because you shouldn't be able to scroll past it like that. So let's find out why that's happening. So what did we do? Position, I did a position absolute. What we're going to do is we're going to change that to fixed. And that should make that no longer able to scroll like that. Hard refresh, open the menu. There we go. So you can still scroll the background, which is fine, but this stays put, which we definitely want. So we're good on that. Cool. Awesome. We're getting a lot of stuff done today. So let's kind of recap on our pages. We have home. Home is looking pretty cool. We have our sessions, we have our speakers. Let's take a peek at our sponsors. Let's see if we can if those are working. We have our table. Let's see. Don't see. I'll have to get the, I'm not seeing any sponsors there, so I'll have to get the API. I'll have to hook up to the API to get our sponsors on that. Tickets are looking good. Let's go conduct. Let's see what we look like here. We're looking pretty good there. That looks good. Now we've got our login screen. Our login screen looks pretty good as well. We had fixed that before, so we're looking pretty good. So let's see if we can't hook up, because the last piece we really need to deal with over here before we get into the login piece is, until we get into the user profile bit, is this piece. So let's see if we can get the sponsors working. I don't remember. So let's go to the sponsors. Sponsor.js, did I not do? I did change it to do the local. So they should work. All right. Sponsor. They may not have any data. That may be at the moment. So if there's no data, there's not. We'll have to figure something else out for today. There we go. I just have it commented out. Oops, that's not what we wanted to do. Let's uncomment that, uncomment that, uncomment that, uncomment that, and uncomment that. Let's see what that does. And refresh. And we have sponsors. And we have a arrow that I forgot somewhere. There we go. There it is. There we go. Okay. Let's see if that gets rid of that little arrow. Yeah. Okay. So we have our sponsors. Some of them have are missing some images, but that's okay. We'll want to do some kind of fallback or hide it if the image does not exist instead of doing that, which is fine. So let's look at what we can do here to kind of make this a little bit more interesting. So we have gold, image, link, and just sponsor. But these kind of all work the same way, so we can give them a standard styling based on that. So source alt. So this is yelling at me. This is the reason this is yelling is because I have a plugin that checks for some basic accessibility issues, and it's yelling because the tag doesn't, it thinks the tag doesn't have an alt tag. But as you can see over here, we do have an alt tag being displayed, and I know that's actually working because see these guys where the images has failed, the alt tag does give us the name of the sponsor. Or if I inspect over here on the Andromeda one, we will see that it does actually display an alt tag of Andromeda Galactic Solutions. And so this is really important because it means that our users that use screen readers or assistive technology actually can know what that sponsor is. So that's really important to have there. So kudos for that. Let's go ahead and style them because right now they're really butting up against each other. They have absolutely zero space. So these are links. They do have a little bit of space. Let's clean that up. All right. So each of them is shown to be a paragraph. What I'm going to do is realistically, from a semantic purpose, this is a list, right? So we're going to legitimately make that a list. So instead of doing that, we're going to take out these inline styles because we definitely don't want that. And then we're going to keep the anchor tag because that links to the sponsor's website. So we definitely don't want to get rid of that. But what we are going to do is do a UL. So for each of these categories, we're going to do a UL. Oh, this is a for each sponsor. So we want to make sure, actually I lied. We want to make the UL outside of that. Because here's the for each. So this is the repeater over here. And so we want to make sure that we're not writing a actual list for each of these. We want to write a list item for each of these. So bring that up. And now for each of them inside of the loop, we're going to make a list item. Because that means that the assistive technologies are going to be able to understand that content a lot better now. Okay. By doing that, we obviously have some styling we need to do again, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to remove the dot. Lists also come with, if I inspect this, we can see that a list has some margin and some padding that automatically gets added. We're going to want to handle at least the left side padding. And then the top bottom works fine. We can leave that margin, but that left side piece, right, this 40 pixels over here of padding, we're definitely going to want to handle that because we want, you know, a nice centered list. So let's go ahead and handle that. So sponsors, I don't think has their own CSS page. I will double check just to make sure. These are images. That's not what I'm looking for. They do not. So let's go ahead and put that in the main. we're going to add our sponsors. Oops, I put it in the wrong file. That's not what I want. So I'm going to close this. I'm going to close that because we don't need that. All right, do we have anything related to sponsors in here? Control 5, spawn, nope. Okay. This has an ID. This is interesting. It's got an H1 over here. Let's double check what that's doing because we may want that to be an H2. Are these H1s? These are H1s. We do not want that to be H1s. We definitely want that to be H2s because our H1 is this H1 over here. So it's sponsor. This is the actual list of sponsors. So this is the sponsor level, right? So this, in terms of importance of information, it's a child of sponsors. It's a subcategory of sponsors. So we definitely want that to be an H2 because that's the next logical step under 1, right? After 1 comes 2. So we definitely want that to be an H2. And then we're going to do this UL is going to be a class equals sponsors. And I'm going to copy that. We're going to save this. I'm going to go over here and we're going to add our sponsors. So, and that is our UL. So the UL for, let me paste it, make sure I spelled it the same on both ones. There we go. We want that list style type. We're going to put none. That's going to get rid of the dot, right? And we want that padding left, that padding, that 40 pixels of padding. We want that gone. 0. Save that. Go back to Chrome. Shift refresh. We are good there. So now we really need to go ahead and add some form of space and maybe some indication for the user that this is actually clickable. Okay, so we want to make sure that we get some level of, because right now the user can scroll through this and never realize that they can click on these and get to the sponsor, right? Which at this point, our main concern in terms of who's happy with this page is the actual sponsor, right? So let's make sure that it's nice and visible that these are clickable. So our sponsors is the UL, the LI, sponsors, LI. We're going to want to give it some margin bottom, 1 rem. That'll give it some breathing room from the others. And then this is where we're going to start having some fun because this is going to separate them. And now we're going to be able to start building out, making these clickable things, right? So what we can do here also is kind of handle image size because you have gold versus small, you know, there's the hierarchy difference. But if you have a very large image like this one available for one of, you know, for yours, you kind of want to give equal kind of space or equal real estate to each, if that makes sense. So let's go ahead and give some image sizing on here. So we're going to do that sponsors, IMG. I'm going to do a max width. What is it currently at? Inspect. I think this is just based on the image size. Yeah, 179. Oops, not what I meant to do. Inspect. So that's just a width of 400. Okay. We're going to definitely cap that in case something gets uploaded that's different. Okay. Now, which does allow us to do on the HTML to say that for the optimization purposes, that the width is going to be around 400. And we don't know the height, but we can at least give a width. So then we can say a text align center, right? We can go ahead and put the actual image in the middle. So on the li, we can do a text, because this is all based on the anchor tag, right? But that propagates down. So this will put it in the middle. We have some margin. We can put a little bit more margin, I think. These are still really close together. And do 2 rows. There we go. And now we're going to give them, I'm going to give them something a little bit more button-esque around them to show that these are clickable, to show that these are links. Because right now the only indication that they're clickable is the fact that I know the code and that I can hover my cursor and I get a cursor pointer, right? So I have that pointy finger cursor thing, which is helpful, but unless you're hovering over it, doesn't actually give you that this is a clickable element. So the anchor tag itself, and I'm going to do this on the anchor tag because I want the anchor tag to be like the clickable area to be what's visible as the quote button. So we're going to do dot sponsors anchor tag. I'm going to border solid 1px. I think we have a bar border. Oh, we do. Perfect. And I'm going to give it, because I have a border, right? If I don't give it padding, what's going to happen is we're going to end up with it, the border being butt up against the logo. We don't want to do that. So padding 1 run, nice and around it. And let's see what that does. So we have our anchor tag, see, is bleeding out of our image. And the reason for that is because our image is a display inline. So if we do our image, we're going to do a little trick here. We're going to say that we want the image width to be, because it occurred to me that we may run into some issues with mobile. We want the image width to be 100%, but we want it to max out at 400. Okay, so it's 100% as long as it is less than 400 pixels, at which point it will take 400 pixels. Then we're going to say that we want a margin of 0 auto, which means top and bottom is a margin of 0, but left and right, just auto place yourself in the middle. And the last thing we need to do is give this a display block or inline block, because you cannot give a width or margin to an inline element. And images by default are inline. So now that I've done that, you will see that our box, why is our box still being done? What is going on with these images? We've got stels coming from somewhere. Stels. The image is blocked. The target is within it. There we go. Target blank. Data bind attribute. That's weird. Let's give our anchor tag also a display block. There we go. Okay. The anchor tag needed a display block as well. So now we're starting to look like something. The other thing we can do is see how we've been softening up our design a little bit. Like our border radius here, we have some border radius. Even if I go to home, our areas, right, everything's got, these are a little bit more boxy, but anything that we have that's clickable has a border radius. Things that are not clickable do not. So in order to keep that paradigm, I'm going to go ahead and give these a border radius. So the next thing we're going to do is if I tab through this, the system is giving me my border, which is fine. That actually works out pretty well. Except I think this is coming from my system. Yeah. So what we're going to do is we're going to create our own hover and focus on this so that it can, instead of using the system color, which in this case happens to be very similar to this website, we're going to use the, we're going to go ahead and write our own, and so that we can control that color. So what we're going to say is that on hover and on focus, I actually want to use the accent. So dot sponsor a hover and dot sponsors a focus. I want the border color to be the bar accent. Let's see what that does. Now we are using this. Now we're using, now it's, yep, that's the, nope. You see what our variables are. Accent hover. So is that bluish green? Is that bluish green? I can't tell. Yeah, that's bluish green. Okay. Okay. So now that we have that, we look decent on, let's see what we look like on mobile. That looks nice. We can go ahead and click these. That looks nice. And what do we look like on desktop? Let's find out. We're looking pretty nice on desktop as well. Yeah, that looks pretty good. The last thing I'm going to go ahead and add on this piece is going to be the, so over here we have this target blank. What I'm going to add for is rel equals no opener. That's a little bit of a security bit that way, because you don't know where, I mean, you kind of know, you trust your sponsors, but when you're linking to a website that's not within your own domain, you always want to add that. Prevents some issues. Okay. So what are we going to do next? So we have our sponsors are now looking pretty good. We've got our sidebar looking pretty good. We've got our home looking pretty good. Let's see if we can log in and get into the actual ones for the speakers that are actually trying to do stuff. Let's see. I don't know if I have an account on here. Let's find out. Let's look at what the console has to say. I may not have set it up to be able to do this locally. The pre-flight request does not pilots control, access control, allow origin. Yay for cores. Staging. We are hitting login, but we are hitting up to cores errors. Let's find out if we can. If this is just because we are hitting cores errors. So there's not much I can do that until I talk to the conference to see about getting the course thing so that I can work on this locally. However, what we can do is, as you may have noticed, when I went and clicked login, there was an error happened, but there was no response to the user. So that's kind of uncool. I had to go dig into the code to figure out that an error had happened. So let's go ahead and add some error handling in here so that when a user tries to log in and gets an error, whatever that case may be, like either they mistyped their password or something like that, if they do get an error, so that they can get some kind of notification of an error having happened. So let's go ahead and find that. I think that is in the login. So we get to play with JavaScript. That'll be fun. Login.html says, here we go. Okay. Forgot password. Okay, so we have forgot password, we have our submit, and we have our or. So probably right under or over the submit is where we want to do that. So here's our submit. There we go. So over here is where we're going to want to put that error. I'm going to do a div class equals error. Something went wrong. Please try again later. Whatever. We'll have to actually put some kind of valid error on here. Then what I'm going to do is see about finding out what the error message would be if it's a wrong if it's the wrong password, for example. We would definitely want to just tell them, hey, it's the wrong password. So I'll have to find out what those error codes are so that we can tailor that accordingly. But for now, we're going to take the JavaScript for login. I think I saw that as we were going through login.js. And so after somebody puts in a request for login, we want to go request.done. This is the login. Where's login? Login function. On-ready, request.status, 401, invalid. Well, we do have invalid email or password, unknown error. Okay, cool. So in the case of we have this show message, let's find out what happens to show message. So we already have that set up. Show message does what? Show message. Show message, show message, show message. Where's our function? There we go. Show message. Document get element by ID error. Insert text. Class list remove. Hidden. Okay. So we already have the JavaScript all set up. That's cool. Now we just need to add that error back in. Or that error container back in. So we have a, oh, it is here. Except it has a slot. There it is. That's the issue. See how it has the style of display none? Now, let's see. Because didn't I just write one? Yeah, I did right here. Let's go ahead and put it right above the submit. I like that better here. Control save. Let's try that again. Take my email address, the password. It's going to throw the error. Forgot, and now we have an unknown error. Perfect. So what we're going to do from there is we're going to style this a little bit more, right? So let's go ahead and take our CSS and style that. Oh, it's going to disappear. It's on a timer. So what we're going to do is I'm going to create a second one underneath so we don't have to worry about the timer with some random garbage in it. And we're going to remove the ID, which should make should get it off of that timer. Yeah, so let's find error in our style sheet. Do we have a login CSS? It has its own. It does have its own. Okay. And we do not have an error in here either. Okay. So let's go ahead and write that error class followed by our onesies. That error. So right now Let's see what we look like. We have our error right here, right? We're going to give it margin 1 rem 0. That'll give it some breathing room. We're going to give it a color. Let's see, did we set an error color when we started the shindig? We did not, so we're going to pick an error color. An error is generally done in red. So we're going to say error color. And let's find, that is a little bright of a red for my taste. We're going to dull it down just a tad. There we go. Makes for nicer contrast anyway. There we go. So now we have an error color, which means that we can go ahead and set our color to error color. And last but not least, we're going to say a before. Let's save that and take a look at that first. Let's not try to burn the ocean in one fell swoop. So we have our error and we have it here. The problem with that is that right now, the only thing differentiating the add as an error visually is the fact that it's red. And so we're only using color to differentiate, which is bad because if somebody is colorblind, red will not necessarily show up as any, if it's somebody is fully colorblind, it'll just look like black like every other piece of text. So we don't want to just use color. We want to use something else as well. So I'm definitely going to bold it. That'll help because we really want people to be able to see it. And then what we're going to do is we're going to add an icon before the error, an error icon, so that it's very obvious that we have an error going on. And so we're going to go back to, remember, if you've been following me for a while, at the very beginning of this project, we set Google Fonts on here. So we're going to use that code from Google Fonts, from the icon fonts. So I want the icons and we want the error icon. And I'm going to take the error icon over here and I'm going to take this code right here. I'm going to copy that, go back here. I'm going to say content / that code. And then I'm going to tell it that, hey, the font for this is the font, the material icons. Okay, so I'm going to take this and we're going to set that there. And in theory, that should put that icon in front of our error. And it did not. I think we've done this before in this. Oh. Before, not border. That helps. Okay, so we have a, it did not take our, did I do the slash the wrong way? It's very possible that I did the slash the wrong way. Yeah, that should help. Now we're good. So now we have the icon showing before. So now what we need to do is go ahead and align it and give it some breathing room and we'll be in much better shape. Now it's kind of small. So let's give it a little bit, and let's say font size 2 rem. So if I double the size, let's see what that looks like. That's really big. Well, half that. That's really big. Now it's much better. So now we need to align it. And there we go. And I'm going to give it a little bit of margin because it's got that weird alignment. So we're going to give it position relative top 2px. make it a little bit, feel a little bit more naturally. -2p up, aligned a little bit more naturally. There we go. That feels a little bit better. And now we're going to give it some space between it and the text. So we're going to say margin right. Let's say 0.5 run. Try that. Yeah, there we go. So we have this one that has no text in it, right? But it's still showing the icon because we don't have anything saying, hey, don't show the icon. So what we want to do is say error not. So in our, because I had added that weird random one, right? So we have over here alert ID rule alert, and we are setting a visibility on it via the JavaScript. So we are saying that the class has a class of hidden, right? So we want to make sure we're only doing it, we're only putting that icon before if it does not have a class of hidden. This is why this one, this one by default should also have it, but it does not. To see, even after adding the hidden, maybe it does work. Let's find out. Maybe I don't need to do anything special since it's hidden. We're good. So that works beautifully. This works. We don't need this not, turns out. There we go. We don't need to account for that. This is good. We can clean this up. We don't need that anymore because we're showing properly. So now what we have is we have an error that is displayed to the user that shows, you know, that shows that something bad happened. In this case, we don't know what, and is very well distinguished as an error. Now, the last thing we're going to do over here is I'm going to change that error for the wording to be a little bit nicer. So we can do, instead of unknown error, we can say something went wrong. Please try again later. Right? So it's not quite as just like, it's a little bit more user-friendly that way. It's a little bit less computer speak and a little bit more people speak in people language, if that makes sense. Cool. So let's take a look at where we're at. So we have this working and loading nicely. So I think this page having a lot of fields and stuff would be a really good candidate to run a quick accessibility test on it to make sure that all of our fields, all of our buttons, all of our everything is looking pretty good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run Lighthouse. So we're going to say Lighthouse. This comes in any Chrome. It's there by default in Chrome. Don't really care about SEO right this second. We're going to do accessibility and best practices, and we're going to click Generate Report. And we're going to wait. And we're going to wait. And cool. We're doing really good in accessibility, so we got those. What does it show us on best practice? HTTP, well, that's normal because I'm running locally. So once that's, we can't really do that. Link to cross. Okay, so that is within a plugin. So we can't do much about that. I'll double check, but I think that's within a plugin. Front-end library with vulnerabilities, knockout. So we'll have to look if we can update that. Char set declaration is missing. Or Chris too late. Ooh, that we can fix though. Errors logged in console, we know. Okay. So the one thing that we can fix right away is to go look at where are we setting our char set? UTF-8. That's interesting. Is it just not written correctly? Let's find out. It is meta char set UTF-8. And what do we have here? Oh, it's in lowercase instead of uppercase. That'll do it. That is in uppercase. We can rerun this and figure that. So I'm going to rerun to make sure we got rid of the error. I'm just going to run the best practice this time. Hopefully it'll go a little bit faster because it should need to warm up this time. And see if that error is gone. And so we really want to do, like I run this, as much as it only gives you for accessibility especially, it doesn't give you everything, right? Because you still need to do keyboard testing. And there's a number of things it won't catch. Like if you have alt text on your image, that's an empty alt text and it really needs alt text. Or if it's a picture of a dog and your alt text says it's a picture of a cat, you're going to have some issues and it definitely won't catch those things. So there's still some manual testing to be done, but doing the quick automated does tell you at least where, while you're developing, that you didn't forget anything major, which is nice. And the issue does seem to be gone, so that's good. So anyway, so we did a lot today. I will find out about getting logged in so that we can look at the speaker profile side of the page, of the site, but I think we're starting to look like something cool. I hope y'all are enjoying this series and hope to see you all next week for more. Have a great rest of your week.